Create a dynamic website from scratch using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All of the source code will be available through the link in the description. First, open Visual Studio Code. If you guys need help setting this up, I'll leave a link to a video up top and down below. Once you have VS Code open, what we want to do is click on the Explorer in the top left here and say Open Folder. And now all we want to do is open the folder where we want to create this project. If you guys haven't created one already, go ahead and create one. I'm going to go ahead and select this one and then click Select Folder. You guys will know that you did it right when you click on the Explorer again and see the name of your custom made folder. We can also close out this welcome message, and sometimes VS Code will ask you to say, yes, I trust the authors. If it does, obviously go ahead and click yes. Now we want to set up our project structure. So the first thing we need to do is right click here and say new file. And we're going to title this our index.html, and this page is going to act as our home page. Next, we want to create a new folder called styles, and inside of this folder we want to create a new file, and we're going to store our styles.css file here. Next, we'll create another folder called images, and inside of this I'm going to go ahead and paste in all of the images that I'll use in today's video. Now you can see all the images stored right here. Lastly, we want to create a new folder called scripts, and here we are eventually going to store our JavaScript file, but we'll come back to this later on in today's video and create those files as we need them. At this point, what we need to do is go back to our index.html, and we need to generate our boilerplate using our exclamation mark and then just clicking enter. You guys will see here that that declares our doc type as HTML, and then it creates our HTML element, which makes sure our language is set to English. And then it generates our head element, which is going to store all of our meta information and stuff like our website title here. All of the stuff that will be viewable on your web page will be located down here within the body element. Now we need to navigate to extensions over here on the left. And what I want to do is search for Five Server. You guys will see this one at the top titled Live Server, parentheses 5 Server by Yannick. Go ahead and install this and make sure that it is enabled. Once you do that, you can close out of this page and navigate back to your file explorer here. So to launch this live server, what we need to do is go down here to the bottom right, and right here where it says Open 5 Server, we want to go ahead and click on that. If you're not seeing this, make sure you close down VS Code and then open it back up again, and it will show up right here. Go ahead and click on this, and this is going to give us our locally hosted URL where we can view our website in a browser. So if I go ahead and pull in my browser tab here, you guys will see that locally hosted URL right here and nothing on the page because we haven't created anything yet. At this point, I'm going to move this off to the right side of my screen and leave my code editor over here on the left. I can go ahead and close out of my terminal here, and I can minimize my file explorer by clicking on it one more time. The first thing I want to do is title this website, and you guys will see that you can see the title in the browser tab here in our live server. So if I go ahead and change this to Bass Expert Shop, you guys will see that appear in our browser tab. Next, we need to do something extremely important that a lot of beginners forget to do, and that's specifying our metadata to our browser. You're not going to see this stuff necessarily in your web page, but it is really important for stuff like search engine optimization or simply SEO for short. So we're going to start off with a meta element with the name equal to description here, and we're going to say the content of this website is going to be fishing reels and lures. Next, we want to create another meta element with the keywords name here, and the content is going to be lures, reels, and fishing equipment. Now we want to add our last meta element, and this one's a little bit less important, but this is going to specify the author, and in my case, I'm going to put Kelman Web Design. Next, what I want to do is link to my styles.css file. So you guys will notice that I put that inside of a styles folder, and then the styles.css file is right here. So what we need to do in this case is create a link element like so. Make sure the rel is equal to style sheet here. And then to get into that folder, we want to start off with a dot slash, and then we want to go into our styles folder and select our styles.css file to make sure that correctly links. Next, I want to create another link element, but for the rel, I'm going to make this equal to icon, and this is going to specify our favicon image, which is what is showing up in our browser tab here. And you guys can see that it's glitching out and showing our browser icon for some reason. That's just a glitch with the live server that I'm using. But to make sure that this actually shows up once we deploy this website, we need to specify it here in our HTML. So for our href, we want to specify the same thing. Go into our images and then select our favicon image like so. And to make sure this works, we need to create a type attribute and make this equal to image/png. Last thing we need to do in our head element for now is add our font awesome icon CDN. This is going to allow us to use free icons. So what I'm going to do is search for font awesome 6 CDN. Go to cdnjs.com, and all of this will be linked down below in the description if you guys need it. And I'm going to copy the link tag right here, and that's just the first one. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that before my style sheet, I go ahead and paste in this CDN and save it. And the reason you want to put this CDN before your style sheet is so you can override styling to whatever you want in your own custom style sheet here. Now we're at the point where we can start developing some content that you're going to see on our web page here. So all of this content, again, needs to go inside of the body element. And what we're going to do is start off by creating our navigation. So we're going to create a comment here called nav. We're going to start off with our header element. And if you just type out the name of the element and click enter in VS Code, it will go ahead and create that element for you. Next, we want to create a div with a class. So to specify a class, we can say period. And we want to call this class header wrapper. And you don't have to name it this. You can name your classes whatever you want. Go ahead and hit enter. We created our div with the class equal to header wrapper. And we're not going to mess with this for a little bit here, but this class is so we can use styling. Next, we want to create a link element using our anchor tag, and this will create an href attribute. And we want to link to our index.html page, and we also want to link to a specific ID. So we're going to use the hashtag symbol followed by the product's ID. And don't be confused right now, we haven't created this yet, but once we create it in a little bit here, this will make a lot more sense. Inside of this anchor element, we want to create an h4 element and then just paste in some text right here. Now you guys can actually see that text showing up on our live server as a link here. And we can go ahead and click on this. It's not going to do anything because this ID doesn't exist yet, but once we create it, it will automatically go to that ID when we click on it. Underneath this div, we can create our nav element with a class of container. Here we want to create an anchor element and simply link to our index.html. Inside of this anchor, we're going to create an image this time, and we want to go ahead and add our logo from our images folder. So I'll go ahead and select the image that I want here. And another thing we need to do is make sure we add alternative text for people that might be using screen readers. So I'll go ahead and paste that in here. And then we also want to add our loading attribute and make this equal to lazy. Underneath our anchor, we're going to create another div with a class of nav-search. And here we want to use a icon from Font Awesome. So we'll go ahead and navigate to Font Awesome 6, navigate to fontawesome.com. And I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen so you can see it a little bit better. Navigate to icons. And what we want to do is search for the magnifying glass, and you guys can search for whatever you want. And down here you guys will see a number of free options that we can go ahead and use. We're just going to go ahead and use this basic one right here for free, and you guys can change out what style of element that you want right here. We're just going to go ahead and use the first one. We'll go ahead and copy this snippet, navigate back to VS Code, and we can just simply paste that in. Now you guys will see that since we included our Font Awesome 6 CDN up here, we can go ahead and put in whatever icons we want from Font Awesome 6, and it will appear on our website. Underneath this, we're going to create an input element where a user can actually type something in. We're going to leave the type equal to text, but we also want to have placeholder text. And all we're going to put here is, what can we help you find? Now you guys can see that we have our magnifying glass, our input element, and our placeholder text showing up. And the nice thing about this placeholder is once a user types, it disappears. Underneath this div, we'll create another one with a class of full-nav and another class of nav links. Go ahead and hit enter, and we want to make sure we add one more attribute here. We'll say area label, and this is going to be useful for people that are using screen readers, and we simply want to say that these are the Navbar links. Inside of this div, we'll create an anchor element, and we want to link to our index.html, and we simply want to say that this is our home page. We can go ahead and copy this, paste it down below one time, and instead of just our index.html, we want to go to our index.html and our products ID, and we'll change the text here to shop. At this point, we can navigate to our styles.css file, and the first thing we need to do is create some variables that we can use over and over inside of our style sheet here. So to create variables, we need to use our colon followed by root. And to name a variable, you need to use 2 dashes and then specify the name. And we're going to call this our primary color. And then I'm going to paste in my color value. And today I'm going to be using hexadecimal colors. So I'll just go ahead and paste that in like so. And now that you guys get the idea here, I'll paste in the rest of the variables that I'll be using throughout the video today. Next, I want to create some global styles. So what this is going to do is it's going to target every single element. So what I need to do is type in my asterisk here. The only thing that we're going to do here is specify our font family equal to Arial, and then Helvetica and sans serif will be our 2 backups in case Arial doesn't work. And I want to specify a font size equal to 1 rem. So what this is going to do is it's going to specify that all of our text needs to show up as Arial and be a font size of 1 rem. And this font size might be a little bit confusing at first. So rem is just a relative unit that we can use to make our website responsive a lot quicker than if we use something like pixels. And now we're setting our font size for all of our text to 1 rem. But if I target something further down, like for example, if I target my H4 element that I created and change the font size to something like 3 rem, which is obviously larger, you guys will see that this resizes. And the reason it does this is because CSS reads from top to bottom. So even though we set all of our text to a size of 1 rem, we can override that further down if we specify it underneath our global styling here. So that's an essential reason why you want to put your global styling first. But for now, we'll go ahead and get rid of that because that's not really what we want to do. Next, we're going to target our HTML element, and we want to specify our font size as 100%. Now this is already the default, but it's a good practice to put this in anyway, since we're using relative units. Next, we want to target our scroll behavior and make this equal to smooth. And this is not going to make any immediate changes, but once we have working navigation links, you guys will see why this is so important. Now we can target our body element and simply make our margin 0. Next, we want to target our container class. So to target a class here, you want to start off with a period followed by the name of the class. And here we want to make our max width equal to 80 rem. And we want to change our margin to auto, which is going to make sure that centers. Now we want to target the top bar of our navigation. So we want to target the header wrapper class, and we want to start off by changing our background color. And to use our variable, we can type in var followed by the name of our variable here, and we're going to be using primary. Add some padding, so we'll say padding 0.5 rem. Next, we want to target our header wrapper again, but in this case, we want to target all of the anchor elements within our header wrapper using A. And then what we want to do is target our text decoration, which is going to be our underline, change that to none. And now you guys will see that gets rid of that. And we want to target this class again, but we want to specifically get our H4 element. So we'll go ahead and target it like so. And then we want to change the color of our text to white. So we'll use our variable WT to do so. Change our margin to 0. Make sure we include our semicolon here, and text align to the center. Now finally, we can target our navigation links. Start off by targeting our nav element, change our display to flex, which is going to put everything in a row-like format, which you guys can see here. If you want to learn more about flex, I'll link to a video up top and down below. And we want to align our items to the center, justify our content as space between, change our text color, our secondary color, and then add a padding of 0.5 rem and 1 rem. And what we're doing here is using the shorthand property. Next, we want to target the image. So we'll say nav image to only target our navigation image. And we want to change the width here to 5 rem, which is going to make it significantly smaller. So now you guys can see our navigation bars starting to come together. Next, we want to target the nav search class, change our display to flex, and align our items to the center here. Then we want to add a gap between our items here of 0.5 rem. Now we're going to target our nav search again. So we'll copy this, but we only want to target the input element. And we want to change our width to 20 rem, change our padding to 0.5 rem by 0.75 rem. Get rid of our border, so we'll go ahead and change this property to none. Change our background color to this hexadecimal value and add a border radius of 1 rem. Next, we're going to target our icon, so we're going to use our nav search class again, followed by fa-solid, and change our font size to 1.5 rem. After that, we want to target our nav links class and our anchor elements inside of that class. Change our text decoration to none. Our color, we want to change it to our variable of secondary. Change our font weight to bold, our font size to 1.25 rem, and add a padding left of 1 rem. So you guys can see we have a nice looking navigation now, but the problem is if we go ahead and shrink this down to a mobile size view width, you guys will see that our stuff does not resize responsively for mobile devices. So we need to start fixing that. So the first thing we need to do is navigate back to our index.html page. We want to go above our nav here and create our mobile overlay. So we want to create a div with a class of mobile-overlay nav-links, and go ahead and create that. And then we also want to once again include our area label attribute and specify that this is our mobile navigation. So at this point, we want to navigate back to Font Awesome, and we want to look for the X icon. So we'll just go ahead and type in X here and hit search. We want to use this one here. Go ahead and copy this and go back to VS Code and simply paste it in like so. And we're going to be using these same anchor elements from below. So we'll just go ahead and copy these, go back within this div and paste them right in here. And so now you guys can see we have two navigations showing up because we haven't added our JavaScript yet. And now we can scroll down, and underneath this bottom div here, I'm going to go ahead and add in our mobile nav button. And this is just another Font Awesome icon that you guys can see here, and you guys see it displaying on the right side. And after our nav element, we also need to create an HR element to add some spacing. Now we can navigate back to our styles.css. First, I want to target the FA-bars, change the cursor to a pointer when I hover on it, change the font size to 2 rem, change the padding to 1 rem by 2 rem. And then we can target the mobile dash overlay class, change the padding to 2 rem, change the position to fixed, the display to flex, change the flex direction to column, add a gap of 2 rem, add a background color, use a variable, and we're going to use our tertiary color, change our height to 100 VH, which is 100% of our viewport height, add a Z index of 2 to make sure this always displays on top of everything, a width of 20 rem, add a transition from the right of 0.5 seconds, which will be useful for animations that we'll use, add a padding of 1 rem, specify right, and we want to say minus 20 rem to move that off of our page. You guys will see that a little bit's still showing up. So to fix that, we want to specify our box sizing and change it to border box. Next, we can target the anchor elements within our mobile overlay class, change our color to one of our variables. We're going to be using our white, change our font size to 2 rem, and add a padding of 1 rem. Next, we need to make sure we're at the bottom of our style sheet so we can start creating media queries. What media queries are going to do is they're going to help us display things at different viewport widths. So first we need to start off with our min width property, make this equal to 769 pixels. So what this is doing is saying use the styling inside of this media query from 769 pixels and up. So first we want to target our mobile nav class, and so for anything 769 pixels and up, we want to make sure that we change the display to none. So you guys are going to see that our icon is still showing up here, but if we make this a full-sized viewport, you guys will see that it disappears because now we're over 769 pixels. So we also need to do this again, but for our full-sized navigation. So we'll go ahead and paste in our media query again, and what we're going to do is change this to a max width and specify 768 pixels. And inside of this, what we want to do is target our HTML element and change our font size to 75%. So now you guys can see over here in our live server that everything shrinks down. But if we make this bigger, you guys will see that it enlarges. And the reason it does that is because we're using rems, which is a relative unit. So we can target font size on our HTML element and change it to whatever we want for this particular media query of 768 pixels and lower. It targets anywhere you use rems or a relative unit. Next, we want to target our full nav, and so we'll use a comma, our nav search class. We want to change our display to none. So now you guys can see that since we're in a mobile size viewport width based on our media queries, we only have our logo showing up and our button to open our mobile navigation. But if we make this bigger, you guys will see that our full size navigation shows up instead. Now the problem now is going to be that if we click on this button here, it doesn't actually display our mobile navigation. So at this point, what we need to do is create a basic JavaScript file. So here within the scripts folder that we created, we want to create a new folder called scripts.js. And then back in our index.html, we want to make sure we link to this scripts.js file. So what we can do here to do this is create a script element, and we need to specify an src value of wherever we are storing that. So we're storing that file within our scripts folder and as the scripts.js file. And then to make sure this works, we also need to include the defer attribute. So here in our scripts.js file, we need to use the const keyword to create a variable. And we're going to call this variable nav open. You guys can name this whatever you want. And what we're going to do is use document.querySelector. We want to select a class. So what we're going to do is select our FA-bars. So what this is doing is it's selecting our element with this particular class. which is going to be our icon right here. And we need to do this again for the element that we're going to be using to close that. So what we're going to do is change this variable to nav close. We want to search for our fa-x class. And we'll paste this in one more time, and we simply want to call this variable nav. And this one, we're going to be selecting the mobile overlay class. And so this is going to select that entire element right here. Now we want to use the nav open variable, and we want to add an event listener. And this event listener is going to listen for a click. And then next we can go ahead and tell it what we want it to do. So we're going to pass in a callback function here. And then we simply want to target our nav element, target the style of that element, and change the right property. And you guys will see that VS Code likes to do weird stuff here. So we'll change this back to style.right. And then we simply want to say that we want to change this to 0. So now if I go back over here and click on this, you guys will see that opens our mobile navigation here. And you guys will see that our X icon is not showing up because I forgot to add the appropriate styling. So I'm going to go back to my styles.css really quick and go ahead and target my mobile overlay class, target the icon element, change the cursor to a pointer, and change the color, font size, and padding. And now you guys can see that element. But now if we click on this, we can't close out of that nav bar. So we need to go back to our scripts.js file, and we need to go ahead and copy this, go ahead and paste it down below, change nav open to nav close, and then change this to -20 rem to move that off the screen again. So now if I go ahead and click on this icon here, you guys can see that I can navigate wherever I want on my website, and I can also close out of this navigation like so. And if I make this a full viewport width, you guys will see that our full size navigation shows up. Now we can go back to our index.html, and underneath our header, what we want to do is create our hero section. Here we want to start off with a section with a class of hero-container. Add the role attribute and make this equal to image. Then we want to add our area label, and this is going to serve as our alternative text since this is not an image where we can add alt text directly. Next, we'll create a div with a class of hero-content, create an h1 and an h3 with our text, create an anchor element where we link to the index.html and the products ID, and create a button with the text of shop now. That's going to be it for the HTML structure. We're going to go back to our styles.css, and just before our media queries, we want to target our hero. So here we want to target the hero-container class, change the position to relative, the width to 100%, and the height to 60 VH. Next, we need to specify a background, and to do this, we're going to use our URL. And to get out of our styles folder here, what we need to do is specify 2 dots followed by a slash, go into images, get our dude fishing JPEG, and at the end here, we want to specify no repeat, center, and center/cover. You guys will see that showing up much better now. And before our URL here, what we can also do is specify a color. What I'm going to do is specify a linear gradient and use my RGBA values to add a slight black gradient over this image. What I want to do now is change the display to flex, align my items to the center, justify the content to the center, and text align to the center. Next, I want to target my hero content class, change the color to our white variable, target my H1 element, and make the font size 3 rem, and the margin 0. Next, I'll target my button, change the color to white, and then I also want to specify the background color, change that to our primary variable, target the padding and make that 1 rem by 2 rem. Change the border to none, border radius to 2 rem, and then our font weight to bold. And finally, we want to make our cursor a pointer. Now you guys can see we have our hero section set up and it's completely responsive for any viewport width. After our hero section, we can start creating our dynamic products section. What we want to do is start off with a section element, add our container class and our products class. And here we can use the hashtag symbol to include our products ID. Inside of this, we'll create an H2, add our products text, create a div with a class of spacing, create a label, make this for our category filter. Then we simply want to put the text filter, create a select element with an ID of category filter. So we'll just go ahead and copy this, paste it here, and then go ahead and hit enter. And then we're not going to have a name, so we'll go ahead and delete that. Create an option for this select element, and our first value is going to be all, and add the text all. So you guys can see what's going on here. We created a label with the text filter, and then we have a select option here where we can choose whatever we want. So we need to have more than one choice. So what we'll do is copy this, paste it below 2 more times. And first we want to filter for reels. Change our text to reels. And then we want to filter for lures and then change our text here to lures. And now you guys can see we have all 3 of our options. Underneath our select, we're going to create a div with a class of grid. Here we'll create another div element with the class card. And then we also want to add a data ID attribute. We'll just make this equal to 1 for now. Here we'll add an image element, and we'll go ahead and add an image of a reel right here. Now you guys can see that display. Make sure to add your alternative text and your loading attribute, make that equal to lazy. Create an H3 element, and for now we're just going to put reel, add a paragraph element and just say description. Then we want to add another div, the class of card-footer. Add an H4 element and we'll just put, for example, $200. Then we'll create a button that says buy now. And if we go down and look, you guys can see we have everything displaying, and the only thing that's styled is our button, because earlier on in our style sheet, we added some styling targeting all of our buttons. At this point, we'll go back to our styles.css file, and right before our media queries, we want to add all of the styling for our products grid. So first we want to target the products, change our margin to 4 rem and auto. Then we want to target the H2 element inside of our products class, change our font size to 2 rem and align our text to the center. Next, we want to target our label, our select, and our option element. And for this, we'll just change our font size to 1.25 rem. Next, we can target just our select and option and change our padding to 0 and 1 rem. Now we need to target our grid class, change our display to grid, specify our grid template columns, and we want to say repeat, create 3 columns at 1 FR each, which is going to make sure that each column is the same size. Then we can add a gap of 4 rem and 2 rem. Next, we're going to target the products class and specifically the spacing class within our products. Change our margin to 0 and 2 rem. And now to start bringing this all together, we can target our card element, change our display to flex, change our flex direction to column, and add a gap of 1 rem. Next, we're going to target the image within our card class, change our width to 60%. Now we can target the H3 element within our card and the H4 element within our card footer. Make sure you add your period. Change the font size to 1.25 rem and change the margin to 0. Now for the card footer class, we can change our display once again to flex, align our items to the center, justify our content as space between, and then add a margin top of automatic. And we need to target the button within our card footer and make the margin top equal to 1 rem. So now you guys can see we have our 3-column layout. We only have one product right now, but there's space here for 2 more products. And you can see this if we go ahead and inspect our page and look at our grid right here. You guys are going to see the layout of that grid with 3 columns here. Now this works great for full-size screens, as you guys can see like this, but for mobile-size viewports like this, we don't need 3 columns. We want something a little bit less, like 2 columns. So to fix that, we can go down to our media query with the max width of 768 pixels. So what we're going to do is scroll back up, copy our grid template columns here, come down below, and we're just going to go ahead and target our grid class. And within this, we're going to paste our grid template columns. Instead of 3, I'm going to change that to 2. And now you guys can see that looks a lot better. Then on mobile devices, we want to target the description here. And we simply just want to change our display to none to clean it up a little bit for mobile devices. And now if we go back to our index.html, we can add each one of our products manually within our grid here, but that's going to become extremely lengthy. And then every time we want to add or take away a product, we have to come back in directly to the HTML and edit absolutely everything. But there's a much easier way to do this using JavaScript. So to do this, what you want to do is go to your File Explorer, and within our scripts folder, we're going to create a new file called products.js. And back in our index.html, we want to make sure that we successfully link to this. So you guys can see we already linked to our scripts.js file. So we can just go ahead and copy that, paste it down below. But now instead of navigating to our scripts.js, we're going to use our products.js. And again, make sure you have this defer attribute. So now we can navigate into our products.js file. And the first thing we need to do is create a constant variable called products and make this equal to an array here. Inside of this array, we're going to create one object for every single product that we want to have in our website. And between each object, we want to have a comma. So in JavaScript, the way objects work is they have key value pairs. So the key that we're going to choose for this is ID, and this can be whatever you want, but starting off with an ID is a good practice when developing with JavaScript arrays and objects. So we'll say ID is 1, and next we want to have an image where we navigate to our image file. So what I want to do is go ahead and navigate to it like so and select the image that goes with this product. Next, we want to have a title, and I'll go ahead and paste the title of this product. And you guys are going to notice that we started off with an ID and we used 1. This is going to be an integer in JavaScript, so we don't need to put this in quotations or anything because JavaScript will take this value as is. But since we're getting more specific with our image and our title here, we need to make these strings. So you guys are seeing that I'm doing it 2 different ways. I'm using single quotation marks to make this string here, and then I'm using double quotation marks to make this one here. You can do it either way, it's the same thing. Next, we want to have a price, and you might think, well, you can create this as an integer. Yes, you technically could, but for our case here, just to keep it nice and easy, we're going to use a string so we can put in our $sign right here, and we'll make this $197.99. And next, we want to have our description. And to keep this easy, I'm just going to go ahead and paste in that product description as a string. Next, we're going to create another key, and we're going to call this hot item. We're going to use a Boolean value. And there's 2 Boolean values of true and false. And for this one, we're going to say, yes, it's a hot item by saying true. Today, we're not really going to use this a lot, but it's just a good practice to know what a Boolean value is and how to use it in JavaScript. And then we want to add one more, which is going to be our category, which eventually we're going to use to dynamically render it based on what the user selects here. So we'll simply say reels. And then make sure you don't put a comma on this last one or it'll start screwing things up. All right, so now I have the rest of my products with the appropriate IDs and values for each key. And keep in mind that you need to separate each with a comma, but the last one does not need a comma. And something that a lot of beginners struggle with in JavaScript is the way arrays are indexed in JavaScript. So technically, when JavaScript reads this array, they are 0 indexed, meaning it reads this first object here as 0 and then so on. So this is item 0, 1, 2, and 3. So it becomes confusing if you don't know that, because you would think that it indexes it from 1 and so on, but it starts at 0 when it comes to arrays. Now what we want to do is dynamically render all of these products onto our page. So what we need to do to make this a little bit less confusing is go back to our index.html file, and everything within our grid, we're just going to go ahead and comment out for now so you don't see it. Then we're going to go back to our products.js, create a variable called grid, and what we want to do is use document.querySelector, and what we want to do is select the element that has the class that is equal to grid. So we'll go ahead and put in that class name, and so what this is doing is storing this element here, which is a div, within this variable in our JavaScript. So from here, we need to create a function called render prods. And so we're going to start off with our const keyword, and then render prods is the name of our function, which you can call anything you want. And then what we want to do is pass a parameter. So we're just going to say R for now, and then I'll explain what's going on here in a moment. And then we'll use our arrow syntax to create our function. So the first thing we need to do is use our grid variable and target the inner HTML. And what we want to do here is make the inner HTML equal to nothing by using an empty string. Now we want to use our array parameter here. And our parameter is going to be whatever we pass into this function when we call it. So here we're just using whatever we're passing into this function. And then since we're passing in an array, we can use our array method. So we can use our for each loop. And what we want to do is pass in a parameter here, which is going to be our product, which is going to be each individual item from our array. Each item, we want to target our grid element and say .inner HTML, and we want to say plus equals. What this is going to do is it's going to loop through each individual product in our array, and it's going to add it to our grid element. So what we need to do now is use our backticks. This is going to be located in the top left of your keyboard. These are not quotation marks, so don't get confused. And inside of this, we want to put our product HTML. So we can go back to our index.html file. What I'll do is uncomment this, cut it, go back to my products.js file, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and paste in that HTML. And what I'll do really quick is format this to where it makes sense. So now you guys can see that I have all the HTML that we created right here. And what we're going to do is use this to dynamically render each one of our products from our array up here down below into our grid HTML element over on this side right here. So we're going to place each one of those elements within here. So first what we need to do is change this data-id, and what we're going to do is start off with a $, then our curly brackets, and here it will allow us to use JavaScript code now. So what we want to do is use each one of our products. So we'll use prod, and then we want to use our ID right here. So what we're doing is looping through this array here, going into each item and getting each item's ID. And then we need to do that same thing for the rest of these key value pairs. So for our SRC, we'll go ahead and change this one out, but this one is going to be prod.image. And then for our alternative text here, we're going to do the same thing. And for our alt text, we're just going to use our product title. And this we can go ahead and copy again, go ahead and paste it within our H3 element, because again, we're just going to use title here. Here, we'll paste it again, and instead of title, we'll use description. And within our H4 element, we'll go ahead and paste it one more time. and instead of title, we'll use our price. And now if we look over in our live server over here, you don't see anything showing up because in JavaScript, to use a function, you need to call it. So right now our function is not running because we haven't called it. So all we have to do to call it initially is use the name of our function, which is render prods, and then we want to pass in our array. So the array that we want to pass in as this parameter is going to be our products array. So we can just copy this, go back down and pass this into our function. And once we do that, you guys can see that every item in our array is dynamically displaying over here on our live server dynamically. So now instead of having to do this for each individual product a million times in your index.html, you can do it dynamically with JavaScript. And the huge benefit of this is let's say I want to remove my 6th product here. I can just go ahead and delete this and boom, there it goes. It's not there anymore. So it makes it a lot easier to make changes and edits. Last thing we need to do is change our products out based on what the user selects here in our filter. So to do this, we want to create another constant variable called filter select and make this equal to document.query selector, and we want to target an ID. So we'll put our hashtag symbol followed by category. So what we're doing is getting the element with the ID category filter. So if we go back to our index.html, you guys can see right here that that is our select element with all these options inside. So what we need to do is use that variable, and we want to add an event listener. And for this, we want to add an event listener of change. So whenever this value here changes, we want to do something. And inside of our callback function, what we want to do is pass in our event object. This is a special object that we can use since we are using add event listener. But we'll use our arrow syntax again. And what we want to do is create a constant variable called selected category. We want to make this equal to our event.target.value. So all this event object is doing is giving us information based on the event that happens to this filter select variable here, which is just going to be this select element over in our HTML. So to better understand that, what I want to do is go ahead and use the console.log statement and log out the selected category variable that we just created. And if we go over here, right click, inspect, and go to our console, you're going to see that nothing's showing. But if we go ahead and change this now to Reels, you guys will see that Reels appears, because all it's doing here is it's getting the value from that option. So you guys can see the value for that option is Reels because we set it over here in our HTML. If you guys want to learn more about this event object, what you can do is just start removing stuff. So if I remove .value and I go back over here and say Reels, you guys will see that now it's logging out the entire HTML element because we're just logging out the event.target, and the target is our filter select element. So that's why you're seeing this entire element. And then you guys can do this as well, but it gets a little bit confusing if you just log out the event because it just gives you so much information right here. But if you want, you can go through this and kind of learn what you have access to as far as this event object. But what we're going to do is change this back to where it just provides us the value like this. And I'll remove this console.log. Now we want to create another variable, but this time we want to use the let keyword, which is going to let us change the value of this variable. So we're going to go ahead and say filter, and we're not going to make this equal to anything. All we're doing here is initializing this variable. Now we need to create an if statement, and we need to see if our selected category is exactly equal to all. If it is, we want to make our filter products variable equal to all of our products. But if our selected category is not equal to all, what we need to do is change our filter products equal to products, and then we need to filter it, pass in each individual product, where our product category is equal to the selected category. And then after all of that we just did, we can use our render prods function here. And instead of passing in our products array like we did up here, what we want to do is pass in our filtered products array. So what we're doing here with this filter method is we're returning an array with only the products that match the value that we have selected. So you guys can see this a little bit better if we go into our live server. If I change this to reels, you're going to see that if our value is equal to reels, it only displays the products with the category that's equal to reels. So anything with lures or anything else, it will skip over and not display it. And earlier in the video today, we used anchor elements to link to our index.html and specifically the product's ID. So now you guys can see, if I click on that, it will take us down below to our products, and likewise with our navigation. Congratulations, you created an entire website using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you even were able to use more advanced techniques like product filtering for an e-commerce website. Again, all of the source code will be available down below through the GitHub link. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them for me in the comments.